So while folks are waiting, my name is Trey Johnson. I'm with the Sage Data and Analytics team. We're certainly looking forward to talking to you a bit today about Sage Data and Analytics, and really grateful for the support from both the Stewart Technologies and the Nexus Business Solutions team to allow us to reach you today. If you happen to be viewing this recording and you didn't attend live, well, you certainly missed some witty banter at the beginning of this, but we're at the point, there's a good number of attendees that I think that have joined, so would it make sense to just get underway?
I think we should.
Okay, excellent. So again, my name is Trey Johnson with the Sage Data and Analytics team. We have a few other folks that are here as well to support this conversation with you today. The most important thing for us is that those that are here attending in person provide some feedback or ask questions, if you will, through the chat interface on GoToWebinar, so that when we get to the end, which will be in about 35 or 40 minutes time, we'll be in a great position to answer those questions and share feedback with you. If you happen to be viewing this after the fact, we will also talk about ways that you can reach us at the end of the webinar. So shall we get underway?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so Sage Data and Analytics very well may be new to many of you as customers, and that's understandable because we released for the Sage 100 and Sage 300 platform back in the May timeframe. Sage Data and Analytics, however, is not new in the Sage ecosystem because we've actually been working with Sage X3 for about 5 years at this point. And so what happened is the Sage 100 and 300 product management teams came to us and asked us to solve a lot of the same challenges we were solving for in the X3 world, specifically for you, the Sage 100 and Sage 300 customers. And many of those challenges are portrayed on the screen. We're not going to necessarily go through all of them, but one of the things that I've heard very frequently, even as recent as just yesterday, and talking to a customer, is that they've gone down the path of using some other technologies to build some reporting, whether it be financial reports or others, and that in general terms, the time spent and the ongoing cost of generating those reports was just not really something that you are probably pretty excited to continue doing. And we understand that. And so that's why what we'll show to you today, alleviates a lot of that in terms of a significant challenge. But more so, what we've really learned, and I think many of the organizations have learned through the course of the pandemic, is there's a need to be able to access information to drive decision-making from a variety of different locations. It's not solely sitting at your desk anymore, obviously. It's not solely being in a position that you can look at data within Excel, but rather being able to use a variety of different devices and form factors to connect your browser and get access to that information. And so we're really breaking down those barriers and providing the opportunity for those level of insights. And speaking of insights, one of the things that we really dramatically have been enriched, and we're excited to show this to you today, is dashboards for all of the key decision makers in your organization. So if you happen to be wearing a financial hat, or a purchasing hat, or a sales or an inventory management hat, we've got analytics that really serve as a great starting point for you. And beyond that, there's just naturally a strong desire for people to be able to do some things with their data, whether it's building reports or interacting with reports and drilling up and down to support, the decision-making process that they need to make in a much more timely fashion and inclusively support the things that the organization does that are data intensive, like financial closes and those sorts of things as well. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. We'll use a couple more slides just to really kind of frame up what SDNA is. And by the way, SDNA is the acronym for Sage Data and Analytics. But SDNA, essentially, as the graphic portrays on this particular slide, sources information very intelligently from Sage 100, from Sage 300, and the other Sage ERPs. Because we're a cloud-based application, we're reading that data up into the SDNA cloud. We're structuring that data in a way that it's best suited for reporting, and then we're providing the reporting and analytics capabilities back via a browser. So the investments in terms of technology and things that you need to do for your individual end users is not high at all. It's very, very much SDNA is managing the majority of the infrastructure around this and really taking away the burdens from on your organization. And so we automate all of those aspects of bringing that data in. And then furthermore, what we're doing underneath all the analytics that you kind of see on the right-hand side is we're delivering a full range of calculations that drive all facets of ways that you might want to analyze your business, whether those be financial calculations, inventory calculations, purchasing and sales calculations. There's many of them listed within the bullets on the bottom of the screen. So if you happen to be watching a replay of this, you might press pause to read them because we won't necessarily read through them entirely. But great opportunities to have very consistent ways of looking at margin and to look at, you know, what's happening in terms of your inventory and your inventory turns. And certainly from a purchasing standpoint, getting very precise around not only things like purchase price variance, but also your delivery percentages and the inventory turns as well. So lots to cover in that regard. In addition, as we look at the combination of what we do for automating the data and automating the analytics, it really means that we have a solution that can quite literally be made to be live within hours, you know, for your business. And part of that is because it's just that much easier to deploy a cloud-based environment than it is to go through all of the kind of the cycles of working with you around what server to have, so on and so forth. And I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised at the end of the session when we talk about the commercial costs for the different plans that we have on offer. It's actually quite less expensive than if you were provisioning your own servers. But what we also do is we very much keep that entire environment up to date. And whether it be the data that's flowing in or simply the application itself being kept up to date, all of those things are made available in a very easy fashion. And the last thing that I'll mention before we get into the demo is what's really great about this is for those organizations, and we know there's always organizations that are on current Sage ERP, be it 100 or 300, that might be looking down the road. The reality is, because of the way that we support the entirety of the Sage ecosystem, you quite literally can pick up those reports and the data and the things that you do today, and if you move to another Sage ERP product, take those with you. And so any kind of investments that you make today around this platform, even if you're contemplating an ERP change at some point in the future, know that you're making a very sound decision because it can support that migration process that you would go through. And so with that said, we'll jump into the demo, and this is where it gets incredibly easy for me because all I have to do is just simply drag over a browser, and that brings us into where we want to be. And so what I'll do is I'll maximize this window, and what we're looking at on the screen is a typical view for a user that's coming into this from a financial perspective. And so we generally start here for a couple of reasons. One of which I mentioned the building blocks, the underlying analytical elements. Those are very easy to see in these performance cards that are across the top of this dashboard. So what you're literally seeing is, you know, calculations around sales and gross margin and profit, all the way through to working capital and debt ratios and things that are very important to the finance side of the organization. What you might also notice is that these individual calculations make their way into the various analytics that you see on the screen. So you have that ability to look at things over time, whether it be margin or profit or liquidity or leverage, or even the cash-to-cash cycle. You have that ability to look at all of those at a glance from here. Now, at a glance doesn't mean that that's the only view that you get, because what you also have the ability to do as a user, a consumer user specifically, is you have the ability to interact with this particular dashboard. And we really are strong believers in, if a dashboard is going to be delivered, it's got to support the interaction to allow you to answer that secondary or tertiary question that you may have. And so in this case, I'll just simply deselect all the companies, and then I'll somewhat randomly kind of select some additional companies here. And you notice the data is repopulating very quickly. That's because we're not running these queries against the ERP, which I think many of you have probably run some reports against your ERP, and they take some time. But rather, we're running this against the data warehouse within the cloud And that's giving us much more instantaneous response from those questions that are being asked. What's fairly remarkable is that we have many customers now that actually they have a better experience than if they were just simply to launch the report against their own ERP, because we can actually extract the data from the ERP, load it into the warehouse, and then you can be asking questions much more efficiently than even sometimes those reports run in the older style of thinking. So that is one way that you can interact, is through these filters at the top. The other is, if you see an item that's particularly interesting or something that needs exploration on the dashboard, well, you're fully free to explore that. So in this case, I've isolated net sales for April because I'm just kind of curious about how it peaked. And if I double click on it, I'm actually drilling down into the time frame, in this case, April, to kind of see what has transpired. And we'll notice that there's some spikes here, and I could continue to do some further analysis, around this. And essentially, that might tell me a variety of things, including the fact that maybe we ran some promotions, towards the end of April or in this particular window. And that's what really drove some of the sales behavior. But I also have the ability to kind of go back up here. And if I don't have quite the answers that I'm looking for from this individual chart, I also have the flexibility, because we build analytical pathways into the application, to go look at other resources. So in this case, we have an income statement dashboard, and I know many of you, if not all of you, have your own views of financial statements and things of that nature. But what we provide, and it looks like the server is getting a little slow, or some performance anxiety, I'm not sure which, but what we're seeing in terms of the individual customers themselves is financial reports are fine, and they are one of those things that you tend to see on multiple tabs of an Excel workbook. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But what we also provide the opportunity for is, if you see analytics or elements from those financial reports, they also manifest themselves very well as analytical elements too that you might want to look at. Furthermore, and apologies for having some slightly sparse data here, what we're also enabling is that ability to move beyond simply the P&L summary view that we have here. And so what I have the ability to do is I can double click on any number, or in this case, I'm just going to do the same behavior by right clicking, and I can create what is called a detail report. Now, a detailed report, because it's automatically generated, is not going to necessarily have a lot of aesthetics applied to it. So we may have more columns than we're looking for, but you can actually create your own standard detail report views that you can always drill through on, and that will give you those results. Furthermore, you can introduce a number of additional filters at the top here. Those filters make it that much easier to kind of reduce the data set. In this case, we're dealing with sample data, so we've got 12 or 15 rows. In the real world, if you drilled through on a financial report, you might be looking at 12 or 15 pages of data. And so in those cases, this is where we believe Excel has a great place in the greater scheme of analyzing and exploring. So what you can do is you can export this data out to Excel, and then you can do those things that you would traditionally do with a larger volume of data in Excel. You might apply a filter, you might do some further analysis, needle in a haystack type things that you might choose to do. You can do that very efficiently with an Excel as a companion, to what you're doing here. Otherwise, there's a lot of insights that one can gather from this, both from a detail perspective, and being in the browser, I can naturally just kind of follow the breadcrumbs back to where we were before, and be back in the case of this CFO dashboard. Now, this particular dashboard, is a great place for us to be demonstrating from, because not only do we have those links that take us into those analytical pathways underneath this chart, but if we're looking at AR as a number or AP as a number, there's also related AR and AP dashboards. And so in this case, we're just going to pull up the AR dashboard here. And again, this is one of those opportunities for us to look at the various building blocks, whether it's open and overdue AR, whether it's collection effectiveness or day sales outstanding. We start to see those elements manifest themselves again in these underlying charts. And so there's, again, the filtering capabilities are here. There's a lot of additional capabilities. So if you're financially minded, the CFO element, the AP and AR elements, all come with some corresponding dashboards to support the initiation of your journey into your data. But again, there's an opportunity to continue to navigate, analyze, and drill down and into other related information. And towards the end, I'll actually show you exactly how you can build a report from the ground up around data, whether it be financial or otherwise. So one of the other things I did want to show just briefly, because I know there's probably some stakeholders that are not purely financial in the audience. So I'll switch over to this sales dashboard. Sales dashboard has all of the same behaviors, but I also have built into this demo a slightly additional behavior as well. We can actually set it up so that when I select from an individual chart, it then filters the other items. So for example, if I select this other region, you'll notice that the data starts to change. Now, not all data changes, and we believe that's appropriate because we want you to be able to control the behavior with our out-of-the-box analytics so that if you know your users and you know some of the additional questions they might ask, you can come in very easily and say, when I make a selection from this chart, I wanted to change this, 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 and this. And so you'll see again that those elements change, as I kind of click through them. The fact of the matter is there will always be some charts that you don't quite want users to change or manipulate as they ask additional questions, whereas there'll be some others that you absolutely want to support that. And so that is one of the key features. So not only are we able to filter, not only are we able to drill up and down or drill through into other resources, but we're also able to ask questions by simply selecting on other items. So if I want to look specifically at American customers of finished products, well, then I've got some of my answers there right away. So.
And Trey, we had one question that came in, and I think I know the answer to this, but are the dashboards canned or do they have to be built? And my understanding is that it's actually a combination of both, right? You can get the pre-canned ones that come with the software, but then customize and build as you go.
That's exactly right, and that's a really good question. And so yes, every piece of the dashboard content that you see here is something that you should, as an end user or an end customer, fully expect. As a matter of fact, at the end of the session, we'll make sure that we talk just a little bit about the ebooks, which are assets that you can actually look at as a prospective customer of SDNA, that has all of the dashboards listed and has a pixel perfect representation of what comes out of the box. So you should expect those elements as part of the implementation that they naturally turn on. And then exactly as you're saying, things that they might want to do uniquely is just simply customization. So we understand that these out-of-the-box dashboards are not exactly a glove fit for every organization. But what we also instinctively know is that if I put this dashboard in front of a salesperson or a sales team, they're going to be able to tell me a lot more easily the things that they would like to see versus giving them a blank screen and saying, tell me what you would like on the dashboard. And so that becomes a very valuable element, and that's great that that question was asked. So.
Yep, and then second question is this from live data or is it a point in time? And then how often does it update?
Yeah, no, fair enough. So good question. So this is very much related to the last time that the data was refreshed. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a high degree of latency around the data. And as a matter of fact, as we'll cover off, just a bit further in the demo, you have the ability to set up different refresh intervals. So for example, if you were using this to support aspects of your financials or financial reporting, as many customers do, what they end up doing is they end up setting up the refresh of the financial only data multiple times throughout the day, sometimes multiple times within the hour. So you have that capability. So you're not really losing much, with regard to the data, whether it's point in time or cyclically refreshed, because you really have some control over those cycles. And that one customer that I was referring to, it took them about 20 minutes to generate their financial statements in their prior solution. In the current solution, there's a 2-minute refresh that happens, twice an hour. And when they go to pull those reports, they come back in about 10 seconds. So they're actually saving quite a bit of time, as crazy as that might sound, by not running the queries directly against the ERP.
Okay, and that was it for questions.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully people keep them coming. So, but so these are, the elements that are available to the consumer type user. Now, there's always going to be additional users that need to do design work, which we'll get into in a moment. But there's also users, actually, if I come over to our environment, this is where designers would naturally find themselves. Links out to self-study, training information. So there's plenty of that. It's available to support the things that your end designers would do. Furthermore, within this environment, not only can they build charts and tables and dashboards individually, they can also build what are called report packs. And report packs are one of those great vehicles for communicating with people that are maybe not going to interact so much with the reports as they are going to want to see that information delivered, say, to their inbox as an attachment. And you might be wondering what a report pack is. And so I've got another tab here just to open up real quickly. It's an opportunity to wrap a little bit of aesthetics around your reporting and your data. In this case, we have a cover page. We have the same types of view that one would have seen on the screen. You're quite literally dragging Sage data and analytics resources, be them reports or dashboards, into pages within the report pack. And so it becomes an opportunity to communicate multiple reports or multiple pieces of information to an individual decision maker or an audience of decision makers. And this feature and capability came online initially because organizations were looking for ways to report kind of a standard pack of information to their board of directors, to executive decision makers, or some external equity partners in the business. And so it made just an ease for that. And it's really evolved into, hey, we've got a team of 40 salespeople that we don't necessarily want them to be super interactive just by the nature of the things that they do, but we do want to deliver to their inbox on a regular basis a set of reports and analytics. And so that's an entirely additional user community. And the great news about that additional user community is there's no charge for having those additional users that are receiving simply things in their email. In addition to the things that you can do on the report packs, like dragging on all the existing content, you can also introduce narratives. This narrative is probably a bit much to read, but you'll notice there's some bolded values here. Those bolded values, just for the purposes of the demo, represent the items that dynamically recalculate. So every time this report pack is run, the data is refreshed not only in the views that you see here for the charts and the dashboards, but also any calculations that are embedded in the narratives as well. So that is certainly, kind of one of the other ways that we address the constituencies that surround it. But coming back here into the design environment, this is because of my rights, I have the full access to not only my own personal folder, that's me, Trey, but also the other elements that are here in terms of some standard folders. Now, this can be rights controlled, so even from the consumer user standpoint, they might have some additional folders they can navigate to from within that more simplified view that I presented a moment ago, or they may have access to a multitude. A couple of things that I want to open real quickly is I'm going to open the Sage 100 model, and actually I'll just leave that as open for now. And this is the element that ties into all of the automation of extracting the data from your ERP to the Sage Data and Analytics cloud-based environment. It starts with the data source or data sources. And so I'll go ahead and click on this one. And while it's coming up here, what you'll notice is that there's a full list of additional tables that are here. But what I'll do is I'll swing back around and also click on the additional data source. And so sorry to be touching on this fairly quickly, but I just didn't want to go too technically deep for this one session, because we can always do a more thorough kind of review of the product with individual customers at the appropriate time. But what you'll notice here is certainly we support Sage 100, certainly we support Sage 300 and other ERP products, but what we also support as an SDNA platform is other sources of data. And you might notice, hey, there's some other ERPs listed here, whether it be Dynamics or SAP or Syspro or the like. That is really part of the thought process that people are always coming to the Sage ERPs from another ERP. So many of you may have had some changes happen around your business, or know others whose businesses have changed through COVID, where there were some acquisitions and other things. We actually have a fair number of customers that are on Sage 100 or 300, that they also have had a Dynamics ERP show up in their landscape through an acquisition, or one of these other ERPs show up. And we can actually support bringing that data in alongside of and including it with the Sage ERP data until such time as those other companies get moved over to Sage. In addition, there's other applications, and it could be Sage CRM, it could be other third-party applications. We support the traditional database access. We support access through ODBC. We even support advanced access to cloud-based applications through REST and OData. And I was actually talking with a customer this morning, and one of their most essential things for planning and otherwise is Excel. So Excel is a data source that they would likely include alongside of their ERP information. And so you have the flexibility of not only reporting on the Sage ERP, but also reporting on these other data sources as well. And so that becomes a very valuable part of the model, which is the item that we see here. Now, within the model itself, there are a number of pipelines, and as the name implies, that's the conduit from the source, in this case, the Sage ERP, to the destination, that centralized SDNA data warehouse. And if I want to filter this down so I can take a look at something here, I'll go to sales invoice lines. And what you'll notice is there's a couple of little chevrons here at the top. If I click on the initial tab, well, this tells me, kind of the way the column names are coming in. What you'll notice is that we're using the information from Sage 100 in this case to define what the outbound columns are, and as a result, what that ultimately does is that makes it much easier to construct and build reports. Now, what you might also notice is there's quite a few icons that are showing up here. The magnifying glass is a reflection of this lookup capability. And what the lookup capability does is allows us to actually say, hey, we're pulling in some related tables. Let's go grab some additional item information and bring it onto the sales invoice line to make it easier to report. And the beauty of this is you do not have to be a coder or anything along those lines to be able to say, yeah, I want item group name, and I check the box, and then that becomes part of the solution. And it's really just that easy to do those data model design elements. And then furthermore, if I click out of this, we also support a variety of calculations. And actually, I'll go to this next step because it says calcs, and I'll scroll down to, oh, here we go, to the gross profit amount calculation. And apologies, it's simple SQL, but really that's what this is for, is we're basically subtracting the cost of sales amount from the extended amount. You'll notice this wheel is spinning. It's giving us a sample, or it will give us a sample in a moment of some of the underlying data so we can make sure that the calculation is right. If you're not into authoring SQL, totally get it. There's some other templates that can be filled out that allow for you to build some calculations. Why do we do calculations within this environment? Because that means that we're calculating the data very accurately at the transaction so that you can then roll that up using other calculations that might be built into reports or other things as well. And so that's a big part of the data model. And in a moment, I'll show you building a report as well. So that was pipelines. We've talked about the data sources. Relationships, the good news is you don't even really need to look at it because we're automatically detecting all of the relationships in the ERP applications because we've worked so closely with Sage R&D that they're actually ensuring that we have all of the related elements when we include a pipeline. This process configurations, to the great question that was asked about the availability of the data, whether it was a point in time or not. If I click on to add a process configuration, just a couple of quick notes here. Firstly, there's some check boxes that configure it, but you'll notice this pipelines. This is where we can be selective, where we can say, hey, I just want to process the general ledger, or I just want to process another subset of this. And you can have multiple configurations here. And if I click on schedule, well, we can schedule it to run at a certain time on a certain day, or we can do it on an interval. And so in this case, this is defaulted to 15 minutes. And what we're saying is, I want to refresh the data for these pipelines every 15 minutes between this start and this end time. And so you can set it up in that way. So if there's some really mission critical stuff, or hey, I want to make sure that folks in purchasing or inventory management, that at least once an hour they're getting some refreshed data for their dashboards. Well, you can set that up and do it that way. And the only thing that we're really asking for is that it conforms with our fair use policy on the cloud, which is quite generous. And in these incremental interval loads, you're probably taking 1 or 2 minutes. You've got between 2 and 3 hours on a daily basis for data processing. You're never going to run into that window if you're doing the incremental. So I will delete this though, because I really would hate for this to start processing while we're going here. There's other elements that are here. It's just important to know that there's plenty to see and probably more detail than I can share. And I really do want to make sure that I also show everybody how we build an analysis report or table from scratch. So this is the designer blank canvas on the left-hand side. The query, where different items go, are shown in kind of this middle region. On the right side, this is actually the model. So the model is comprised of numeric elements that we call our measures, and everything below the measures is considered to be a dimension or a topic. And so as I scroll this, an ERP brings forward a lot of topics that we might use for analysis. And it could potentially be overwhelming, except for we do some things to really make sure that this works incredibly well. If you're familiar with some other products, some may be Sage products, some may be not, oftentimes people have been limited to only reporting on sales or only reporting on finance, or basically some silos within the ERP. We're bringing all of the data from the ERP into this one environment for reporting, which is incredibly important for those purchasing folks that need to look at the sales ledger, the inventory ledger, and some GL items all side by side. But if I expand measures here, what you'll notice is that we have actually put into folders the various groups of numbers that we're interested in. So if you know you want to do some reporting on the sales invoice lines, well, you just simply expand it. And in expanding it, you'll see that these are the individual metrics that we can use. So if I do the invoice amount, including tax, and I put that on columns, well, you'll notice almost instantaneously, I've got a summarized number. And that's the beauty of the warehouse, as it starts doing it. But more importantly, around the data model, if I collapse measures, you'll notice my scroll bar is gone because I've got a reduced set of topics. So we know which topics relate to which numbers you select. And so we keep you very much, kind of within the lane in terms of the questions that you want to ask and get answered as a report designer. And that's why we so successfully have so many users that are not traditional IT users that sit within finance or wear other analyst type hats that can build reports for their businesses. Now, from here, we may do a number of additional things. Like I might want to look at, actually, let me look at customers, because they've got a little bit more rich data. And so we've got customers, a variety of different attributes. I might grab this particular grouping, and I'm going to add that to the rows. And you'll notice that there's a pyramid-shaped icon next to many of these attributes. That means it's a hierarchy. That means it can allow for multiple levels of drilling up and down. I believe in this case, there's probably not much of a hierarchy here. It's probably just a single level, and that's fine. That solves for maybe what we're looking to do. But additionally, there's some other hierarchies that are very notable, not the least of which is the dates. So a lot of your organizations are probably looking at your fiscal year wrapping up in 14 or 15 days here on the 31st of December, in which case you likely would use the calendar orientation for the dates. Some may have a slightly different fiscal period, and when your model is created, you can set up one or more fiscal type calendars for viewing the data. Now what I'll do, and you'll notice the YQMD or the YWD, year, quarter, month, day, year, week, day. So there's a couple of different hierarchies that are supported there. So I'll expand this, and maybe firstly I'll drag filters up to the slicers, the years up to the slicers. And you'll notice that I can drop this down and I can see, okay, I've got pretty good data in 2021, data in 2020, 2022, not so much. That makes a lot of sense because we're not there yet. So what I'll do is I'll actually remove this because I'd like to do something a little bit more specific. So while I've got this expanded, one of the first folders is time functions. So what we have the ability to do, and this is a really strong and often requirement, organizations typically want to always be looking at the most recent month, quarter, semester, or year. And so if I expand current period, I can say, let's put the current year on the columns. Now, there we go. We've got 2021. We also have the label for this singular metric. So I'm going to put this metric in the background because we just don't really need to see it per se. And what that also frees up is it frees up the opportunity that I can go work with these other elements that are here in terms of these functions, or I have some shortcuts. I can right-click current year, drag and drop. I can do time, parallel period, period and prior year, and now I've got 2021 versus 2020. What's really great about that is I can also start the process of building my own calculation. So if I right-click, I can choose custom formula. I'll do something that I don't do as often as I should in demos, which is give it a name and go ahead and hit enter. And now I'm just going to build the calculation out. And so this is not dramatically different than what you might do in Excel. We're basically going to say, here's the prior year. I'm going to use my operator, which for subtraction, and I'm going to drag up the current year. So I'll get rid of this invalid formula syntax. So current year subtracted from the prior year. I'll go ahead and click on apply. And now we have, a set of data that we can look at. And so that it's really just intended to be that easy. And when we navigate up and down, it's automatically doing those calculations. There's a full range of things that you can do. You can conditionally format the information, things of that nature. And of course, once you get a table of information, you might want to start to move in the direction of a chart. Now, this chart is not particularly attractive. So what we might do is we might go into the chart ribbon itself. We might choose a slightly different chart type. Maybe I'll choose this orientation. Boy, I'm not really helping my cause. So what I'll do is I'll choose select data, and maybe I just want to chart 2021. So that's getting a little bit better. I can resize this, so it's easier for me to see. When I end up with something that I'm happy with, or proud of, I can then take that information off, save it off, and then include it in the dashboard if that's appropriate. Otherwise, I can just leave this as an individual report that people can interact with. I likely would institute some more filtering across the top, or maybe say item groups, things of that nature, so that people could actually do some more selection. That's as simple as coming back into this query or going into the query of one of our existing out-of-the-box reports. And in this case, I'll go down to items. And we'll do item group. I just want to make sure this has got some good data in it. Oh yeah, it's got good data in it. So we'll drag this up to the slicer. And now I can kind of manipulate this from we'll start with finished products because we know we had sales on that, and then we can kind of play with others as we would choose to. So it's really just intended to be that easy. Once we're happy with it, again, we save it off. Our consumers can then discover it, and they would discover it again through this more simplified view. They can navigate through the folders here. They'll just basically see the boxes that they can kind of drill into to get access to the other pieces of information. So it's intended to be that simple. It's intended to be that straightforward. Within a very short period of time, you can have these analytics that are out of the box up and running, for your organization. The main activities that go into making sure that these analytics get stood up correctly for your business is we work with your finance team members to map in your chart of accounts so that we're looking at revenue correctly, looking at expense correctly, things of that nature. That then drives all those underlying building blocks that build up the analytics within the solution itself. So I know that we covered a lot of ground. Thank goodness we have that recorded. So what we're going to do is maybe just talk a little bit about the commercial side of this, continue to feed your questions in, and we'll kind of bounce to those as we can. In terms of the approach that we've taken with packaging this for you, the customers, really we started off with absolutely the requirement that not only does this need to be commercially approachable from a pricing and packaging standpoint, it needs to be easy to understand, but also you need to understand that it can be deployed quickly for your organization and arrive in a very competitive way versus some other options that you have. The other piece that's really important is certainly through Stewart Technologies and through Nexus Business Solutions. They're acting very much as your Sage business partner, and are the ones that are certified to support the delivery of the solution as well. So the actual packaging itself, we really have 3 different options: a standard, advanced, and premium. The intent is that there should be a place for everybody to start here. So standard is very much kind of the entry point, or the entry level point for the offering. It's a bit restricted in terms of it can only support reporting on 2 companies. It has a limited number of users and designers and consumers. Where you see the 10 gigabytes or the 30 gigabytes or the 75 gigabytes, that's the volume of data that gets uploaded to the cloud. And so even if you have a 50 gigabyte ERP database, we're only grabbing 20 to 30% of the data. So that could be 10 to 15% or 10 to 15 gigs of data that would need to upload to the cloud. And so that might still allow an organization to fit into the standard. The other element of standard that is different than the other 2 options is it's only for GL, AR, and AP, whereas the advanced and premium are for those 3, plus sales, purchasing, and inventory management. So there's a bit more data, a bit more insight that's available through the advanced and premium. You might notice also where it says the 1 scheduled refresh per day with a footnote on advanced and premium. What this basically means is, as a customer, across these 3 plans, you're entitled to 1 scheduled refresh. However, if you're working with your partner, which I know all of you will, then on the advanced and premium plans, you can set up multiple schedules throughout the course of the day to allow for the processing of that data in. Furthermore, starting with the advanced plan and continuing on to the premium plan, you can add additional users. So in this case, you can add 5 consumers to the 10 that are there to arrive at 15. Or in the case of premium, you're starting with a fairly sizable number of consumer users, and there are no limits on the number of consumers you add. The number of consumers that can be added basically start at $9 a month or $108 a year, and designer users are slightly more expensive on an annualized basis. And so that's really the approach that we've taken. Provides for some different options and different capabilities there. Premium does provide automatically some connectivity to other data sources. So if you have other data sources, or have more than 5 companies, or have more than 15 consumer or 2 designer users, then premium will be the place for you. In terms of the prices that you see here, this is the cost of the software and the cost of the hosting annually. So, I know I mentioned earlier that sometimes organizations, get wrapped up in having to acquire servers and licenses for database products and those sorts of things. That's not a requirement here at all. Basically, you're licensing everything that you need under these individual price points. The only delta or addition is that you're paying for the implementation. And again, that implementation tends to be short, 24 to 40 hours, really depends on kind of the scope of what's chosen from advanced, premium, or standard. And so those are things that we're happy to kind of drill in a bit more on with yourselves and obviously your partner. In terms of the education, the support, and the way that most organizations go forward, most organizations are working directly with their partner around the most essential support for things like customization. So an implementation is undertaken first to get the out-of-the-box pieces up and running for your organization, and then the customization requests like, I need to change this dashboard, I'd like to introduce an additional report, I'd like to change the data model to include some of our user-defined fields. All of those things would be considered, additional requests that would naturally fit into customization and be available through your partner. Second level of support for the product is through Sage. I think that's a very common model. And the third tier of support is actually with the publisher, which is Zap. I actually work for the publisher, Zap. And so we have global resources that support not only North America, but the entirety of the Sage kind of universe. So, and speaking of Sage University, there's courses that are available for customers around analytics design, data model design, financial reporting design as appropriate. The last piece that I'd like to get into before we get back to any questions, is just simply as there is an edition for everyone, there's an ebook for everyone. So there are 3 ebooks that will be available to you for download. they will probably be sent out as a link because they're kind of cumbersome to attach. There are several pages. There's a lot of the detail about the product in terms of some of kind of the key values, but there's also a very important appendix that includes that pixel perfect representation of the dashboards that you get with each edition. And so those, to that question was asked earlier, these are elements that are delivered and are part of the software purchase that you make, whether you make a choice for the standard edition, the advanced edition, or premium, you're going to be getting those assets as part of your annualized subscription. So with that, I think I've covered all the ground that I intended to. If there's more questions, happy to answer them. Otherwise, we're very grateful for the opportunity. Are there any other questions that are out there?
So I'll ask a question. For Sage 100 customers, specifically, what are most of the Sage 100 customers that you see are migrating from? Because the people that are on the phone, we've got them on Sage Intelligence, I've got them on Explore, we've got them doing crystal reports. There's a couple that are on here that, you know, have huge reports that run after hours at night because they're too big, you know, to run during the day. It would like crash Sage. So I was just curious what a lot of people, you know, that you guys are seeing migrating to this from Sage 100, what kind of the standard mold is, if there is one.
You know, there hasn't been historically a lot of tools for, you know, that Sage 100 customer, but the ones that you named, you know, Sage Intelligence, doing crystal reporting, Excel shenanigans or magic, however you want to refer to it, you know, there's a fair amount of that's out there. A lot of those customers are moving, you know, from those technologies, you know, into this environment, frankly, because they've really kind of run into some limits. And I think you're articulating some, you know, where, you know, reports just can't run during the day and that sorts of things. And that's a little bit tragic, you know, from a supporting decision making. You know, we also have customers that have moved over from other Sage products like Sage Enterprise Intelligence, where frankly they just found the experience a little bit too difficult for their organization. And so, but the vast majority, one of the key facets, I don't think I'm telling any secrets here, is that Sage fully validated that we can do all of the same reporting that can be done within Sage Intelligence, so that it was easier for those customers that wanted to see themselves moving over to this product, that they weren't losing any kind of reporting capability when they came across. We've got a lot of great financial reporting examples that are available, and you know, we've got a lot of customers that have somewhat standardized around SDNA solely as their reporting platform. But in general, people are coming from a variety of different directions. Most of them are coming from a direction of it's too challenging, it's too technically cumbersome, or frankly, it's something that they just no longer have the skill sets as an organization to support.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
For sure.
No one else has had questions.
That's okay. That's, you know, there's probably other, you know, questions that folks have, and, you know, we would just highly encourage that anything they'd like to hear further from us as an SDNA team, that they just work back through, you know, Stewart Technologies and Nexus Business Solutions through your points of contact. We're always happy to jump on a phone call, you know, to have a dialogue about what people are thinking or what questions they may have. It's certainly something we understand is, while it's not commercially prohibitive, that people still want to make sure they're making the right decisions, you know, for one of the different plans. And so we're excited to always kind of help people through that decision-making process.
And actually, one other question I did have, and I think this was covered earlier on, but I just wanted to restate it one more time. So for the servers themselves and like the installation and configuration, there's really nothing per se living on the customer's environment. It's really hosted out with you guys, and there's just something on the customer side to push that data over. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So the only thing that gets installed in the customer environment is a piece that we call as a data gateway. And so it's literally a very small application run somewhere on one of the computers within the network close to the ERP. And that's what facilitates all the secure communication and delivery of information up to the cloud. It's people don't need to worry about, is their information in any way exposed or compromised, those sorts of things. It's just a highly secure environment that at this point has hundreds of customers running within that same cloud infrastructure.
Okay. That was my last question.
That's great. That's really good. And I'm sure the people that are going to watch this recording later on will very much appreciate those additional questions. So, and if they happen to be watching the video, again, I don't know if there's any specific emails that they need to reach out to, but I think they probably would know, who their Stewart Technologies representative is, or their Nexus Business Solutions representative. And we really genuinely look forward to any conversations with those folks.
Okay, well, we'll make sure to have the recording up in the next couple of days and available to everyone. So thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Troy, for doing the presentation. It was awesome. And if you have any questions, definitely reach out to us, guys. We're going to be reaching out to all of you, obviously in different fashion, since everyone that's on the call has like a different reporting need or a different reporting requirement. So we'll be reaching out to you guys to talk through those requirements and see what we can do to help.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.